26th Manhattan Borough Board meeting.
Move to adopt the agenda.
First, I'm going to call for a motion to...
Second.
For the Borough Board meeting agenda, motion passed. Oh, sorry. What do you say?
Without objection.
Yeah, how many in favor?
How many in favor?
Opposed, abstained, okay, motion passes.
Okay. Next, I want to call for the adoption of the June 28th Borough Board meeting minutes. Yes.
Motion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Wonderful. And it has been adopted. To start off, we have a very brief presentation by our HBD colleagues talking about fair housing together. So please welcome up Michael Sandler and company. Welcome. Yes. No.
Well, while we figure that out, hello, I know that you have a lot to discuss today, so I'll try to keep these brief. My name is Michael Sandler. I'm the Director of Neighborhood Planning at HPD, the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, joined by Lulu Michelson, our Fair Housing Engagement Manager. So we're here to talk about a project that's launching this summer called Where We Live NYC. It's the city's comprehensive fair housing planning process. So today I'm going to give a little background on what I mean when I say fair housing. We'll talk about what we're hoping to achieve through this process, and then how we'll talk about how we're planning to engage New Yorkers in this process, engage Manhattan residents. And then following the presentation, we'll have opportunity for a very brief Q&A, and I'll take Lucille's lead on how brief that is. So first, what is fair housing? The Federal Fair Housing Act, which has its roots in civil rights era activism of the 60s, was created to protect people against discrimination when they're renting, buying, or securing financing for housing. The Act specifically prohibits discrimination based on these 7 protected classes. That's race, color, national origin, religion, sex, disability, and the presence of children. New York State and New York City's human rights laws include additional protection based on other things like your source of income, your age, your sexual orientation, military status, to give just a few examples of the types of things that are protected by fair housing laws. The Fair Housing Act also requires jurisdictions to receive federal funding from HUD to affirmatively further the Act's goals. But until pretty recently, it wasn't really clear what affirmatively furthering the Fair Housing Act's goals really meant in practice for municipalities. So that takes us to 2015. The Obama administration issued new rules articulating the responsibilities of jurisdictions to affirmatively further fair housing, or what at HPD we refer to as AFFH. HUD said that jurisdictions, that's a city, a town, a county, or a state, must do more than simply prevent discrimination. They have to take affirmative, proactive steps to overcome segregation and disparities in accessing opportunity. And this means, and this is a quote from the rule, replacing segregated living patterns with truly integrated and balanced living patterns, and transforming racially and ethnically concentrated areas of poverty into areas of opportunity. In general, HUD outlines, and the city feels strongly that the way to achieve this is through what we call a balanced approach. This means we have to look at mobility strategies. How can we create or preserve affordable housing in areas that are high opportunity, which means they have access to good schools, transit access, healthy environments, for example. Or on the other hand, how can we do place-based investments, increasing opportunity through broader community revitalization efforts, including investments in affordable housing, but also investments in education, transit, or other amenities in neighborhoods that lack those resources. So what is Where We Live NYC? This is our, so we know that opportunity is not shared equally by all New Yorkers. Where we live impacts our access to jobs, to education, to safety, to public transit, to positive health outcomes. And these disparities that exist in New York are in many ways rooted in our nation's legacy of discrimination and segregation in the housing market. So Where We Live NYC is our process to study, understand, and address patterns of residential segregation and concentrated poverty and how those patterns impact New Yorkers' ability to access opportunity. The process is being led by HPD, but in close partnership with Nycha, and in collaboration with other government partners, residents, community leaders, service providers, advocates, and other government partners like yourselves. It'll culminate with the release of a report in 2019 that includes measurable goals and strategies. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we plan to engage New Yorkers and stakeholders in this process, and then I'll talk a little bit more about what that report is going to look like. So we'll be leading a public engagement process that we've broken out into these 3 phases. We're here today to make sure you know and understand this process and how you can participate in it. We're here very early in the process. So right now we're in this learn phase. This sets the groundwork for the planning process. It's an opportunity to understand what fair housing challenges look like here in New York, engage with data, and identify contributing factors or causes of the issues that we're talking about. And it's taking place this spring and this summer. Next, we'll have this create phase where we'll be surfacing ideas for policy solutions based on the information that we collect in that first phase. It'll take place this fall. And then in 2019, we'll transition to the finalized phase, which is where we'll share back our initial policy framework, taking into account all that we've learned through this process, and it'll be the public's opportunity to weigh in on whether we got it right or need to make final suggestions before we get into the final report. This engagement strategy involves learning directly from New Yorkers through focus group style meetings and large public workshops. We've also convened a stakeholder group comprised of community leaders, service providers, academic researchers, and advocates who are meeting to provide their professional perspective on some of these issues as well. And then finally, we're engaging elected officials, members of the Nycha Resident Advisory Board throughout this process, as well as community boards. So when we are speaking to New Yorkers, we have 3 core research questions that we're trying to find out more from everyday New Yorkers about. These are things that data that exists doesn't really give us a good picture of these issues. So first is, why do New Yorkers live where they live? We want to understand the factors that contribute to housing and neighborhood choice, or in many cases, the lack of choice for New Yorkers. We want to know, how does where a New Yorker live impact their access to opportunity and their household's access to opportunity? And then finally, what solutions do New Yorkers want to see based on those things? Servicing what people like about their current housing situation, the current neighborhood, and how it could be better. At the heart of this is what we're calling community conversations. These are focus group style meetings with a specific population, community, or neighborhood, and we want to understand how these issues really play out on the ground with a focus on populations that are protected by fair housing law, as well as communities that are traditionally left out of government decision-making processes. So for example, our outreach is going to focus on Nycha residents, voucher holders, immigrants, people with disabilities, seniors, LGBTQ individuals, and individuals with different racial, ethnic, and religious backgrounds. These sessions will be led in partnership with community-based organizations. We have 13 community-based CBO partners leading these conversations with the help of Hester Street, a nonprofit technical assistance provider. We're also working with the Interaction Institute for Social Change. They're a racial justice firm, and they're helping us ensure that we're creating space to have meaningful and productive conversations around fair housing issues and how they relate to race and discrimination, which can be tough conversations to have. We'll also be launching a website very soon that'll include a downloadable version of this community conversation for anyone that's interested in participating. And the website will also have project updates, resources, and an opportunity to share feedback directly with us there on the website. This fall, we'll be hosting starting this fall, we'll be hosting large public workshops. There'll be an opportunity for the public to report back for us to report back on our findings, educate New Yorkers about fair housing issues, and then hear from New Yorkers about their priorities for goals and strategies that'll go into the final report. So what is this final report that I keep mentioning? So this process will culminate in an extensive public document in the fall of 2019. It'll bring together data and policy analysis, a summary of what we've learned in this community engagement process, and then concrete goals and strategies with a plan for tracking and accountability. So I mentioned before this balanced approach, so just a reminder, the goals and strategies that end up in this report will be things that focus on promoting housing choice, the ability to move to high opportunity neighborhoods, and then making investments to ensure that opportunities are distributed more equitably across the city. Goals and strategies will likely include some altogether new city policies. We also expect them to focus a lot on making tweaks to existing programs to better address fair housing needs. And so this seems probably a little abstract, so to give some just concrete examples of the types of policies that could be involved in this, I'll give some examples from other cities that have gone through similar processes. So in Philadelphia, they're expanding support for Section 8 voucher holders to promote access to high opportunity areas in Philadelphia, but also in the suburbs, making sure that the counselors and the folks that are working with Section 8 residents know that they could move to a suburban area where there might be different opportunities available to residents. They're also focusing on households with limited English proficiency in those counseling programs and households with children. In New Orleans, strategies included identifying vacant land in underserved communities to support both affordable housing development, but also things like food access, recreation, and green space in those communities, not just affordable housing investments. And then they're also developing a formal plan to assess how banks are meeting their obligations under the Community Reinvestment Act. And then in Los Angeles, their plan included strategies to improve fair housing enforcement. So they added new protections for transgender individuals and undocumented immigrants into their fair housing laws and enforcement regime. We're in a place right now where HUD and the federal government is really stepping back from these issues, and we are forging ahead with this process regardless. We see New York as a national leader on these issues, and we think that this is a really great opportunity for New York to grapple with a long-standing challenge and step back from our day-to-day work and think about how our neighborhoods are shaped, what that means for New Yorkers, and how can we be an example for the rest of the country on these issues. So just to clarify next steps, and then I'll open it up for Q&A. This summer, we'll be launching our full public website. We'll be starting these community conversations in communities across New York City. We invite community boards to download that community conversation toolkit and engage with the activities. And we're happy to help and help walk you through those activities if that's helpful. And then in the fall, we'll be conducting a series of large public workshops. And we'll be continuing to provide opportunities for public input through the release of the final report. So there'll be a draft report next year that you can comment on, and then more opportunities for engagement throughout until we release this final report next fall. And we wanted to brief the borough board really early in this process. We're just getting started. And so, we're here today to just make sure you know that this is happening and take any questions that you might have. And that's it.
Do you have the website address?
So the website is not live yet. Right now, if you Google "Where We Live NYC," I think that will take you to like a stub on our HPD website, but it should be up. Lulu, what do you think? In the next month? Yeah, and it'll be like "Where We Live NYC.gov.
Yeah, we can. If you want to email us, we can also make sure that you get the link, or we can send it along to you guys.
I had another comment. There's a Nycha housing project up in Community Board 8, which is the Upper East Side, and there's a proposal to build, to use rights and to take away a playground in that area and some other green space and build a building that's half market rate and half affordable housing, which seems to be setting the Where We Live NYC in the opposite direction. Community Board 8 is very concerned about that. So it's not as much a question as it is a statement. I also would suggest that you get some developers on board with this because we are losing so much affordable housing with all the new construction.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Richard? Richard and then Roberta?
I'm somewhat confused about some of the objectives, particularly since some of the community boards have undergone rezoning and the same issues have come up and there have been limited answers given and some kind of definitive answers. So are we redoing the wheel all over again, specifically for those community boards? That's the first question. And there have been a number of studies that have been excellent. So are we reinventing the wheel in terms of that? And finally, I really don't understand the final objectives, particularly since there are legal areas which you have no responsibility of changing in the city and state. And is the ultimate goal, and this is a loaded question that you wish to do, is desegregate neighborhoods based on either race or income?
Yeah, so I think I heard 3 questions. I'll start with the third one, which was, is the ultimate goal to desegregate neighborhoods? You know, right now, the process right now starts with first understanding what are existing conditions, second, what should our goals be, and then third, you know, implementing solutions for those goals. I'll bring it back to this balanced approach, which is that, you know, we expect that our strategies will follow a balanced approach. So one is promoting choice and opportunity for folks that want to move to a neighborhood of their choosing, increasing that opportunity. So folks that want to move to neighborhoods where there are great schools, where there are great parks, making sure that all New Yorkers, regardless of their race or other protected characteristics, can move to those neighborhoods. And then second, increasing opportunity in all neighborhoods. And so that's that balanced approach. And then you asked a question about, are we, you know, reinventing the wheel, or are we starting from a place?
Well, I referred to many of the studies of Furman, as you well probably are aware of, and they are clearly well done.
Yeah,
There's no doubt about that. And I also refer to you to census data as that is always updated by the ACS, and that's clearly well done as well. So would focus all that, including other areas like the National Low Income Reports and other housing issues. How is this any different in terms of the data that you're already going to get? That's particularly
so we're
asking.
So you know, we have one is looking at those reports and looking at those data and understanding what we should do based on that. So, you know, the data analysis in the report is looking at that census data that you mentioned. HUD actually created a tool for municipalities that takes census data from the ACS, and there's a series of maps about, you know, what are residential living patterns, what are patterns of segregation, concentrated poverty, and how do those relate to access to opportunity. You know, New York City, the government of the city of New York has much richer data about those things than the census does. And so what we're doing is starting with that census data, but then understanding where do New York City agencies also have richer or more nuanced data that can add to that picture. And then the other source of data is understanding from New Yorkers how housing choice really plays out on the ground. There's great data about where people live. The questions of why and what are the factors that go into housing searches and how people end up in a place. It's very complicated. We want to use this process to understand that better. And then are we, you know, going to go and undo old policies? You know, this is looking at, we see this as an opportunity to step back. The government of the city of New York is not stopping for this process to happen, and so policy will continue to be made over the next 2 years while they do this process. But we see this as an opportunity to step back and think about, you know, past policies, past actions of the city, and how do those relate to segregation? How do those relate to concentrated poverty? And what, in making future policy, should we be doing better?
Roberta?
How are you engaging the community boards and the communities in Nycha?
So, in a number of ways. So first, we're engaging with Nycha residents through these community conversations, these small focus group meetings. We're working with the Nycha Resident Advisory Board, which is made up of tenant association presidents from around the city. And we'll also be working with Nycha district councils and reaching tenants through their tenant associations. And then through these CBOs, they work with Nycha residents. Engaging community boards, we're here now to speak with community board chairs, and we want to continue working with community boards throughout this process. We encourage community boards to do this community conversation with your board, whether it's with your housing committee or your land use committee or in any way that works best for your community board. And as I mentioned, we're happy to help in any way that you want to run one of these meetings. We're happy to come and help and speak to you. Yes, yeah, we'd be happy to come to a housing committee meeting. Oh, there's a question in the back.
Okay. Question in the back, sorry.
I live in a gentrified area just north of us, area in Street and Walnut mostly. you know already, I'm not saying anything new. You've got a large number of people who are terrified of gentrification. And even when gentrification begins to come into their neighborhood, then they enjoy the improvements in the neighborhood, but they're very, very, very nervous about increased gentrification. And they really want protection. They don't want to be compelled to move, particularly from these very aggressive developers and landlords who will do everything they can to evict them.
Those are great points. I think we understand that the issues of segregation, of neighborhood choice, of investments in communities in New York City in 2018 necessarily involves grappling with the issues of neighborhood change, of affordability crisis, of displacement and potential gentrification. And so these issues we know are tied up together, and we want to use this process to understand what that means. You know, this framework of understanding fair housing is a nationwide framework, and it wasn't necessarily created with cities like New York in mind, where we're facing an affordability crisis. And so I think you brought up really great points that we want to grapple with through this process.
And just to add on to that, so when we say housing choice, that we're trying to promote housing choice through this process, that's the choice to move into a new neighborhood or the choice to stay in your existing neighborhood even as it changes. And so we understand that in New York City, and part of why we're doing these community conversations is that we're trying to understand where do people want to live if they didn't face discrimination, if affordability wasn't an issue, and how do we support them in making that choice for themselves and their family. And so we understand that choice also means the choice to stay, and we're interested in exploring that over the next few months.
Any hope of any building having to go through Bueller?
I can't answer that question. I don't know.
Okay, but I'm just saying that's
Yeah.
the only way, with all due respect, to deal with your challenges in the borough of Manhattan. I cannot speak for the other boroughs. Without that, challenge.
Thank you.
No
Thank
more
you.
as of right would be the only way to do it.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Yes, we'll send it to.
And the
We'll send it out to everybody.
The HUD toolkit you said you meant?
Sure, we can send a link to that as well.
Okay.
Michael, we can send it to,
Yeah.
we'll make sure we get it out to everybody.
Fine, coming whenever I need to. All right, so I think our next topic is the challenges of the Garment Center. And I want to thank the community boards who've been involved and the elected officials who've been involved. And for those of you who haven't, I appreciate, because I think everybody knows, particularly Manhattan, the history of the Garment Center and how much it means. I have to say that when I came into office a few years ago, the Garment Center was being proposed by the administration to move wholesale to Brooklyn to Sunset Park. And I was upset about that, and I want to thank the Economic Development Corporation because we've had a big change and we've had many, many meetings. I'll go through them quickly, but I do want to thank EDC and most importantly boards 4 and 5 to say that something similar to the work that Board 1 and others have done in the South Street Seaport, where there was a suggestion of big tall towers on the South Street Seaport, and thanks to the community board's efforts and the local elected officials, there's no big tall building in the South Street Seaport, and I don't think there ever will be. So these efforts, thanks to you, every single person at this table, you know, your efforts make a big difference. So in terms of the Garment Center, it has been a priority, this office and many of you at the table. So when plans first started circulating to lift the zoning restrictions, some of you know that there has been, I think it was in Ruth Messenger's time, but I could be wrong, in that some years ago. The zoning restriction basically said that those manufacturing firms looking to relocate out of the garment district, that zoning restricted, lifting it and just moving was not going to be satisfactory. So we spoke to many, many people, businesses, workers from the Garment Center, and we came to believe that keeping a long-term core of garment manufacturing firms in the district was essential to preserve the ecosystem. That's the foundation of this industry. All of us who've been there know that if you need a zipper, you need a glove fix, you cannot go to Sunset Park, particularly if you're on Broadway. Broadway uses, and Bette Midler did lose a glove at one point, And I understand she had to go a few blocks to get it, or somebody did, she didn't. But the point is, the Garment Center is the hub, and we need spokes in other parts of the city, but we do need the hub. So we insisted on a pre-planning Garment Center steering committee, and with the speaker and other electeds, and as I said, community boards 4 and 5, EDC, representatives of manufacturers and unions, they've been extremely helpful. Real estate and experts, I want to thank Revney also. We worked really hard for months to come out with a report that I hope you have. You don't have the report in front of you. I don't know if there are copies on the desk out there, but it's on our website, and we can certainly get you a copy. Yeah, I guess it's here. Okay, I didn't know. There's a summary here. This report recommended that we need to keep a core of long-term manufacturing space in the Garment Center, a hub. And obviously, as I said, there can be spokes. To do this, we recommended an IDA tax abatement program, and to the credit of EDC, they have met with almost, if not all, of the owners in the Garment Center. It's a small group of people. They have been there for centuries in terms of families in many cases. And, many of them do want to keep manufacturing and others don't. But it's been challenging because the preservation district restriction has not this administration. All administrations have not enforced it. So what's happened is offices have come in. So we recommended this IDA tax abatement program, and the steering committee appreciates that there was a lot of effort by the EDC staff to go meet to try to get people engaged and signed up for that, and you'll hear more about that in a little while. But we needed more than the IDA program, and we wanted a set amount of space preserved, and that should include the purchase of a building. That was something that came out of the steering committee. So it was about a year from the start of the steering committee, during which the staff, as I said, worked really, really hard. But we didn't want anything to happen in terms of lifting of the restrictions. So I hope that we might be able to stabilize the Garment Center, but we continue to hear firms having difficulty renewing leases. They're on month to month, and when you're on month to month and you're making gloves and bags and clothes, it's very, very stressful. So we wanted to know that the status quo, even with the zoning restriction in place, was not going to work. In fact, we knew that because of the pressure, just keeping the preservation zone as an entity wasn't going to work. It's just not being enforced, and there's too much grandfathering in of illegal, essentially, commercial spaces. So this spring, the speaker and I met with the president of EDC. We believe that EDC had really been working hard to sign space up for the IDA program. They had letters of intent, and they still do, even more letters of intent in terms of solid letters of intent, for 300,000 square feet of space. Maybe not as much as we would like, because we're aiming towards 500 or 750 in order to really save the Garment Center. But it was a serious amount, a lot of effort, and we hope to get more, and you'll hear more about that in a minute. We were adamant that a tax bait program, which is the IDA program, was not enough. And to the credit of the speaker, he was really adamant about a building. And EDC in the budget, thanks to the speaker, agreed to put up $20 million toward the purchase of a building. That's not enough, but it's a good beginning, possible for more. And we've been talking to banks and other entities about figuring out a way of financing financing a building. We just need a building to be financed. We cannot go back and change the 30 years of failure to enforce the zoning restriction. We are faced with a situation in which the restriction is not working. As I said, businesses do move. And I wouldn't even think about lifting the restriction, it's a Gail speaking, if I wasn't pretty sure that this package of financial support and commitment to preserve space wasn't an improvement over the current situation. It's kind of like gentrification, the same issues you deal with and East Harlem deals with. If you don't do anything, gentrification. If you do something, how does that preserve? It's that same challenge that we're trying to deal with over and over again. So it's not perfect, the current proposal, but I don't think we'll ever have this kind of opportunity again. And we have the resources now to enhance the Garment Center. And I want to thank again, I can't thank enough, wards 4 and 5. Not only did they discuss this, but they had hearing upon hearing upon hearing, and well attended. Very, very well attended hearings. And they adopted resolutions that were, quote, no unless certain conditions are met. So most of those conditions dealt with achieving certainty that the IDA goals and the building purchase would be met. Yesterday we had a steering committee here. We meet all the time, just so you know. Yesterday at our steering committee update, EDC outlined how hard they are working to do that and how flexible they were willing to be to sign up more owners. In other words, the square footage could be a little bit less than what they proposed, and the building, we're going to make, if all goes well, opportunities outside of the garment center. If anybody knows about a building, please let us know, right? Eric's tired of me talking about this building. So today I'm advocating for a resolution, which I hope is before you, that is a yes with conditions, but a yes that stresses how important and necessary it is to meet the goals that I've outlined. 500,000 square feet, buy a building, and hopefully even more buildings signing up for the IDA program, which you can hear more about when EDC kindly speaks. So I'd like to call, I know that the speaker's not able to be here, but his very, very able representative is here. Very, very helpful to this process is his district, and he's a speaker. After that, we'll have a brief presentation by EDC and then discussion by the boards. Eric, all yours.
Thank you, Borough President Brewer. On behalf of the speaker, I'd just like to thank everyone who's been a part of this process over the last few years, and in some cases, decades, particularly Community Board 4 Chair Bert Lazarin and his board, and Community Board 5 Chair Vicky Barbaro and her board, and particularly Borough President Brewer, who over a year ago impaneled a task force here in this room composed of stakeholders invested in this district, many of whom didn't agree on much of anything going into the room, but over the course of months worked through the difficult issues and emerged with a set of recommendations that EDC then pursued. Really an example of how communities and government can work together to work through difficult issues. EDC has been able to, while they haven't been able to achieve all the square footage that we recommended, they have been able to lock in a substantial portion of it with the real possibility of getting more. The real game changer being their commitment to invest in the purchase of a building that would provide a permanent manufacturing hub, garment manufacturing hub in the garment district. So given the choice between doing nothing and taking advantage of this opportunity, the speaker looks forward to working with his colleagues and all of you in advancing this application and continuing through the process.
And and also just the timelines, right? So there's a discussion here. The final, for lack of a better word, city planning would be towards the end of the year. So we would have, hopefully, opportunity to get, I'm really focused on the 500 or 750, I like that number better, square footage, because you need a certain criteria, you need a certain number in order to feel that it is a real hub. And that's the, that's the goal. So just so you know, it's not the end, 300,000 is definitely not the end. I want to make that clear. We have more time to do the purchasing or the IDA process. Something to add. I don't know if there are questions now. I just want to go to the presentation.
I want to thank EDC as well for their hard work.
I hope I said that. They met owners that have cats. In the office, a lot of them.
I also wanted to pass around the one-pager which speaks to these various programs as well. This is, I'm sorry, a document that we've been, thank you, that we've been passing around over, as Gail mentioned, 6 public hearings in the past 6 weeks, I think. So it's been a busy summer. My name is Julianne Herskowitz. I'm a vice president at the New York City Economic Development Corporation. I'm joined by Lauren Wolf, also vice president in the real estate transaction services team at the New York City Economic Development Corporation. So as Gail and the Speaker's Office mentioned, we were charged last summer as part of the Garment Center Steering Committee to really identify solutions to preserve and bolster the existing fashion ecosystem in the garment district. And we spoke for 3 months about a variety of different things and critical tools to support the industry in its place in the Garment Center. But not surprisingly, what was the most salient piece of those discussions was real estate stability and how do we provide all these garment manufacturers with real estate stability. So coming out of that process, of which the community boards gave up their summers as well, and we met for 3 months. What became most evident was that we needed to use the New York City Industrial Development Agency, which is a tax abatement program through the New York City Economic Development Corporation, to provide property owners with tax abatements in exchange for giving their garment manufacturing tenants long-term leases at affordable rates. So, thank you. So this is really one of the most key things that we developed, and I should be very clear that this is actually extraordinarily divergent from what the IDA does on a day-to-day basis. For those who are not familiar, the New York City Industrial Development Agency provides discretionary tax benefits primarily to businesses and property owners in the outer boroughs, certainly not below 96th Street. And those are generally for businesses and property owners that are making extraordinary investments, generally capital investments in their properties, and it's more of an expansion, right? It's giving tax abatement to property owners and businesses who are actively expanding in their businesses or properties. This is very divergent. Instead, what we are doing is, this is much more of a preservation tool. And we have targeted property owners, and actually, Gail, we just had another good conversation yesterday.
So excited.
I'm very happy to share this. Property owners in the Garment Center bid, so looking just even beyond the preservation areas. I should also make that clear. The garments.
Keith, shut up.
The Special Garment Center District, which was created back in 1987, and city planning is here as well and can provide more detail here. They're just on the mid-blocks within the Special Garment Center District is where the preservation requirement is actually imposed. But we thought, let's look beyond that, because we understand that, frankly, the garment district and the garment businesses are diffuse. They're located on the side streets, on the avenues, throughout the entire Garment Center Business Improvement District boundary. And so we wanted to expand that, again, to increase our catchment and to make sure that we were really speaking to as many property owners as possible who have a critical mass of garment manufacturing space in their buildings. So just to go into a little bit of the details, again, I explained this, but really the primary goal is providing fashion manufacturers with long-term real estate stability in the district. Understanding, as Gail very rightly mentioned, many of those businesses are on month-to-month leases. Or go quicker. Sorry, Jim. Okay. So just what it, as I said, the eligible geography is the Garment Center bid. The term length is a minimum of 15 years with potential renewal options at the election of the property owner. We targeted buildings with a minimum square footage of 25,000 square feet of garment manufacturing space. That being that we wanted to target properties that are already renting to these types of businesses, right, and would intend to and want to do so for the next 15 plus years, but are starting to look at properties that may have a little less below that threshold. And then the most important thing is that those businesses will get long-term leases with a rent cap of $35 per square foot, and that's a gross rent, so that's inclusive of common area fees and other things. So it's more $25 to $30 per square foot effective rent. And then in exchange, property owner would get $1 per square foot for every 25,000 square feet of garment manufacturing preserved applied to their gross square footage, and that's an annual tax abatement that they would receive for the duration of the program. So I'm going to turn over to Lauren just to touch on the building acquisition, which Borough President mentioned as well.
So as a complement, we had developed the IDA program and signed up some buildings when we went to talk to the speaker and the borough president. And as the borough president mentioned, we were pushed to also add a building acquisition. So we had this program complement the IDA. We were initially targeting buildings that had less than 25,000 square feet of garment manufacturing, but after yesterday's discussion, we're going to think more broadly about that. But the idea is that the city would bring up to $20 million. They profit with a not-for-profit, which would bring some money as well. And together, our money and their money would be used with debt to purchase a building. So we're not looking at a $20 million building, which has been a little bit confusing, but rather more like a $70 million-ish building. buildings in the garment center are like $700 a square foot. So if you think 100,000 square feet of garment at $700 per square foot, that's a $70 million building. And we think our $20 million, the nonprofits' money and debt could be used to buy a building. We think those economics work. So the timeline for this is that in September, which is soon, we would release an RFEI for groups to propose to us a building and their financing, and that we would then move forward with this building acquisition. As the borough president has mentioned, the big thing with this is that there needs to be a building. So people are already, I think, starting to look, which is good.
I already called a broker.
There we go.
That's great.
And that's it on the building acquisition.
And then just this, lastly, EDC has done a significant amount of work to invest in the fashion industry writ large. Actually, de Blasio administration tripled the city's investment from $5 to $15 million. And that includes a number of different programs. So we understand real estate stability is most critical, and those are the two prior programs that we just identified. But in addition, there will be a number of different programs that fall within these buckets. So first is modernization investment technology. That's actually an existing program we have with the Council of Fashion Designers of America that provides factories with direct grants to invest in new machinery and equipment. And then these other buckets that we are actively developing new programming for include workforce development, district-wide marketing and branding, industry organization, technical assistance, and then finally designer support as well. So I think we'll leave it here.
Are there any questions? I know Jim is the expert more than I. Are there questions before we hopefully take a vote? And also, if the council members want to introduce themselves who just came in, Margaret?
District 1, Margaret Chin. District 8, Diana Ayala.
District 4, Keith Powers.
Hi, District 7, Mark Levine.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, questions? Yes, go ahead.
What about the ancillary related businesses like fabrics and fittings and in small storefronts?
So it's a great question, and actually this is something that we are actively looking at as well as part of the IDA program in order to expand our numbers. We understand that this is something that is critical for the fashion ecosystem. You can't have the factories without those ancillary businesses. So this is actually new news, Gail, but we're actively looking to include that as part of the tax abatement program to boost our numbers and in order to preserve the ecosystem in its place.
Fabulous. I know you go to Mood. Does everybody go to Mood? You have to go to Mood. I mean, it's the best store in New York. And when you go there, you want to save the garment center 10 times over.
That's for men and women, right?
Yes, it's fabric.
It's fabric.
Fabric. I mean, you have to go to Mood. MOOD. Just find it, look it up, and go. Because then you're going to say, I know why Gail wants to save the garment center. You haven't been to Mood. What's wrong with you haven't been to Mood? Yeah, okay, go ahead.
There is a maximum gross rent on the tax incentive program. Does the maximum gross rent apply in the new building? Because it's not expressly stated. And if I may, I would love for the borough board resolution, not voting on it, to include the max rent and in those words so that it is memorialized.
So the idea would be that the building that is purchased would then go into the IDA program, so it would have to comply with the same requirements.
I just think it should be expressed because in the borough board resolution it does not say $35 a square foot.
The one thing that I want to offer is that I could see a world where a building is bought that is not garment, that is leased. And so it's possible that the building would be converted over time to garment. So you could see that the initial rents could be higher and then brought down as those leases expire and are re-tenanted with garment. But you're absolutely right that at the end of the day, or very quickly, the building should be all garment, or very much they're to that effect, and that the leases should be within the IDA program.
It came up yesterday because how can you have an IDA program at 35 and a building at 40, right? So I think
90 and then the $1 a square foot doesn't give you enough incentive for the manufacturing to stay. So
I think the good news is government money is going into it, so we're not going to put in a higher rent when in fact this is the whole purpose. And second, the banks that are the unions involved, to be honest with you, they want to keep manufacturing. So I don't believe it would ever go over than whatever the IDA number is, 35.
Yeah.
So I hear you. I just don't know if we want to do it because I'll tell you why. Working with the banks is challenging, and the more restrictions we put on them, then the more challenge we have in getting the loans that we need. So, I mean, I can promise you that 35 will be the max, because you can't do it. You cannot have two different numbers. So I just want to say, I don't want to do it only because the banks are, we're trying to get money out of them, and I think it'll be successful, but I think with the too many restrictions, then they may balk at it, so.
Then perhaps it could be mentioned as a target to achieve.
Absolutely, yes, we can do it in here. Any other questions or comments?
Yes.
You know, we've had some experiences where a landlord enters a program like this, but at some point in the future, the economics change and they want to sell out. What happens then?
It's a really great point, and sorry, for purposes of time, I kind of glossed over this. So, you know, one reason why we are so excited about the IDA program, I think in comparison, let's be honest, to really the city dropping the ball when it comes to compliance via zoning, is that we at EDC have a dedicated staff that is in our compliance team, over a dozen people, who would be reviewing on an annual basis leases from businesses as well that are self-certifying that they are getting this deal, they're getting rents under $35 per square foot gross, as well as their long-term lease. And then the property owner is doing the same on an annual basis. So there are penalties within the first 5 years of the program that are the tax abatement that they receive plus damages. So there is an extraordinary incentive to not leave the program at the onset, and thereafter, as we anticipate, let's be honest, as taxes continue to rise, that this is going to be a great incentive for these property owners to continue to rent to these types of tenants. And of the 300,000 square feet that we have signed up, really 3 of the 4 buildings fit the bill where they have nearly 95% of their tenancy is garment manufacturing. This has been their business model for decades, and they see no reason why they should change that.
And the one other point is that one of the buildings is not even in the preservation district. So this one building is just renting to these tenants because they want to rent to these tenants. And that's true. They're not the only building that does that. You know, obviously we anticipate that there will be buildings that will continue to rent to garment tenants that do not enter our program, and they'll probably rent to them forever, but for whatever reason they don't want to enter. So you know, people are just doing this because that's their business model. Their family for 70 years has rented to these types of tenants.
Yes, exactly. Any other questions? Yes.
What do you see happening at the end of the 15-year lease? That doesn't seem like a lot of time.
Well, in comparison to what's there today in terms of these businesses, I think it's an extraordinary amount of real estate stability and security for them. Gail, to her credit, and the Speaker's office pushed us to think through beyond the 15 years. So we are actively pursuing at the election of the property owner the ability to extend the IDA program post the 15 years. But then that's why the building acquisition is so key, because that represents permanent space within the district.
Any other questions? Okay, so I guess we're ready to call on the roll. Right? Do we have a motion to adopt the proposed Garment Center text amendment resolution?
Just a minute. You have a, you're taking a vote on the resolution
Do we have any discussion on it?
without any discussion?
Let's get a motion, a second, and then discussion.
Oh, okay.
Let's
Okay,
follow
I'll put it on the floor.
So do we have a motion? A motion?
A motion, I'll move.
Vicky? Okay.
Yeah.
And a second?
I'll second.
Okay, for a second. Okay, so now we have a motion, we have a second, and we have now discussion on the resolution.
I'll go. I have a lot of comments, a lot of questions, and some concerns. The first is, who's voting? Is it just Board 4 and 5?
Board 4 and 5, the Borough President and Council members.
Right. I have a comment. It has nothing to do with this, but I think there's something that we ought to think about, and that is, I've always wondered why, when an issue addresses a specific district, why only, this is only for Borough Board, why only the community boards in that district vote, but all the council members do. I think it's, I don't know, maybe that's part of the charter, I'm not sure, but it always, I understand council members vote, you know, overall when it goes to the council, but at this level, if all council members vote, then I think all community boards should vote. That's just a comment.
Okay.
And I'll go on. Okay.
Vicki, it is part of the charter, but
it is probably
charter
through the charter.
revision, so it's
I think it should be.
I want to
So
say
it may not
that
be part of
is
the
a
charter.
perfect example of why the community boards have to be involved with the charter revision committee.
Exactly.
Jim is on the commission.
And if you see Gail's testimony to the Mayor's Commission, the 2018 Charter Commission, is out there. It's on community boards, so you might all want to take
All
a
I
look.
did was talk about community boards. just so you know.
Okay. Okay, the first thing is.
And I had to go to the Bronx to do it. Because I couldn't go to the Manhattan one. I went all the way to the Bronx.
Okay, first thing is something I called about last night, and I think it's an oversight because it's not in there, and that's on the third whereas. You left out community boards and you put us in as other stakeholders probably, but I think
I made the change, but it may not have
it didn't
gotten
get
made on
into it.
these.
If you could add us as part of
okay.
the steering committee and not
Sorry,
other
Vicky.
stakeholders.
Uh,
Okay. Let's see. The first thing I'll do is mention.
Vicki, yeah, point me to it again.
It's paragraph 3, whereas 3, and it would be, you have listed Garment Center Steering Committee members, and
Yep.
it should go in, you know, could go in after
Okay,
real
other
estate.
state and federal
Put us next to
elected
Real Estate Board of New
officials
York, that would be very cozy.
and community boards.
Okay.
4 and 5. So it will read, representatives of unions representing garment workers and costume makers work, other state and federal elected officials representing the garment district,
No.
community boards 4 and 5.
No. I'm sorry. Couldn't it be in the list of Economic Development Corp., representatives of garment manufacturers, Council of Fashion Design, fashion designers, put us after Real Estate Board of New York.
Oh, sure.
And we didn't play an other role, that's all.
Community boards 4 and 5. Okay, great.
I'm a stickler, I'm sorry, I'm
No,
just a
no,
stickler
no.
when it
Very
comes to
helpful.
resos. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is quickly go over what we did and why we did it. So I'll make it very short and sweet. We had I think a 3 or 4 page resolution denying unless, and the reason we denied unless, we had 6 concerns. And those concerns were things that Gail has already talked about, but I will go over them again. Enforcement having to do with manufacturing compliance and public input. The supply chain, we all are concerned about that, and Bette Midler's glove. Public input, it's not specific, the proposal is not specific in regard to a mechanism for public input. Robust outreach to businesses, individual designers, and so on. The 5th one was and you all heard this last month, ad nauseum from me, unintended consequences of the hotel development. Board 5 had a real concern over that, more so than anyone else. And 6, we had considerable concern about the rezoning proceeding without new protections and programs being put into place. So that was the reason why we came up with the deny unless. I will say right off the bat that based on what I know has been accomplished thus far with EDC and with Gail and the meetings that we have held in the last, how long has it been, 2 years, Gail? About 2 years. We will be voting to abstain. We will not be approving it. We will not be outright flat no, but we will abstain. And that's largely, Gail, because of you. I want you to know that. We have tremendous amount of faith in you. You always fight the good fight for us. We hope that we could win, but we know that you'll be there right to the end doing it for us. So that's the reason why we will. Last month, as you know, I voted no. I could not vote any other way, but this month I will abstain. So I do have a couple of things for clarification. Going back to, I heard your response regarding Terry's comment on the IDA initiative program, and I was wondering, again, because of the way I feel about resolutions and that they should have more information rather than less, in the whereas on page, well, it's on the second page and it's number 8, and it gives the listing of, it starts with subsequently agreed with the Manhattan Borough President and Council Speaker, and then number 1 is the creation of the custom IDA tax abatement program. It refers to the 15 years. Could we add in there, because that's just the tax abatement program, the fact that there's a minimum fashion manufacturing space of 25,000 and a minimum of gross rent of 35?
I did add the 35, so what I have right now is the creation of a custom IDA tax abatement program to preserve government manufacturing space for 15 years with a maximum rent of $35 per square foot. EDC, because we're looking at being flexible on the amount, so we can perhaps capture spaces if buildings have less than 25,000. So
we wouldn't want to do that
Yeah.
if possible, just again, Vicki, to give us more flexibility.
I think we want to preserve as much flexibility.
Because but we're trying to look
Okay,
at
if it
buildings
helps,
that might have
fine.
slightly
That's
less.
fine.
So we'll add the maximum rent of $35 per square
Okay.
foot, right where Vicki said.
Okay. And then the last thing I wanted to, I need clarification on, is on the resolve. Number 1 talks about the 300,000 square feet, and it says, be the subject of approved applications for IDA tax abatements or the subject of applications. And then it says, awaiting final approval by the IDA prior to the final approval of the text amendment.
So in other words, that maybe this wasn't as clear as I meant it to be, that they either have been approved prior to the adoption of the text amendment. The IDA applications have either been approved by the IDA prior to the time the council adopts the text amendment, or they're awaiting final approval prior to the time that the council adopts the text amendment.
So that's the condition, that that it either has to be in line to be
Yes.
approved or approved. So, number 3, number 3 talks about the 500,000 square feet. Does that include the 300,000?
Because if you remember, and that's a minimum, not be less than 500,000
And
square
why
feet.
can't that be part of it, of the number 1? Having to do with the prior,
Because number 3 is through combination of building purchase and IDA, that we reach the
but 300,
minimum.
and so 300 is part of the 500,
Yes.
yeah. Let me just think for a second.
1 is IDA and 2 is building purchase and 3 is total.
It's total including IDA.
Yes. And again, it's not less than 500,000.
And it
We're
can't
not
be,
saying-
and it cannot, my question was, can it be prior to the final approval of the text amendment? That was my question.
Well, the only reason I did, it's probably unlikely that we're going to have closed on a building prior to the final approval. The IDA applications, yes, you know, we're
Pushing them.
demanding
Yeah.
that they be either done or awaiting a vote.
Right.
The building purchase, I think, would be a little unrealistic.
Identify.
Yeah, and I think we say in number 2, the building purchase be as close to realized as
Yeah,
possible.
yeah. Okay. All right, let's see, I think those might be the only ones, let me just make sure. Yes, that's it, and just to thank Gail and
No,
thank
thank you.
EDC.
Thank you,
and-
Community Board 5, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Can there be something about enforcement? That's where it feels
Bert.
Yeah. Again, I could start with positive, okay? We very much appreciate the process that you and the speaker, oh, okay, Eric's over there, initiated and continued and support. This is a very, very important issue to us. We have a different part of the Garment Center than you do. You have the core. We have 8th to 9th, which is a different animal. And that because of that, we have some issues that
we
are not
don't have.
necessarily that you don't have. The resolution that we have before us is pretty good. It's pretty good. We had a vote last night. The full board, the committee had voted a letter out, our health kitchen land use a couple of weeks ago. And our format is similar to Community Board 5. Vote to deny unless these conditions are met. And some of the specific conditions are included here in the resolution. We would prefer that 750,000 be specifically mentioned, not at least 500,000, but between 500,000 and 750. We'd like that. We also have there is already over 180,000 square feet that has already been preserved from the old resolution going back to the 80s of the zoning. We would like that to be made in perpetuity, like permanent affordable housing, permanently zoned for manufacturing, can't be changed. The building itself, we would like that also a number be attached, 150,000 to the building. The issues that are unique to us on the 8th to 9th Avenue side are, I see in that further resolve. They're included here, but in our resolution here at the Borough Board, it's for continuing discussion. We would like it resolved before we vote. The issues about, we have some 8th to 9th issues about illegal or uninformed demolition. I guess that's the best word. That the realtors say, oh, we didn't know we couldn't do it. So I call it uninformed now, uninformed demolition. The concentration of hotels. I mean, we have a couple of blocks in there that it's, you think maybe it's one architect, one kitchen, but like 7 facades with different names, one right after another. Something to address that. Also, which we don't have here in the be it further resolved to discuss with city planning, is something about the ability to convert to residential in some of those blocks between 8th and 9th. That would be something that we would need. Yeah, we have the signage, the illumination, that's included here. But again, like the demolition and the anti-harassment, it's to be discussed. We don't have anything in hand that we could point to. Again, this is a great process. It is such an important way to go about getting all, as they're called, the stakeholders involved, everybody who has something in this process, coming up with some kind of consensus of what we want. Another issue is, yes, we appreciate the $20 million. Of course, we'd like more than the $20 million.
You're going to get more because the building is not no $20 million.
Yes, yeah.
Well, that's also noted in number 2.
Yeah, and EDC in their presentation said, well, between debt, which I guess means a loan, debt, not-for-profits, and the city commitment, they'll get up to the $70 or $80 million.
More like 150.
There's some landmarking issues, but that doesn't have to be included in the zoning. That can be, because we have identified some buildings, again, in that 8th to 9th corridor, between 42nd and 34th Street, that could probably be landmarked, but that doesn't have to be taken care of in the zoning or in the resolution. That can be done separately. This is, as it stands, a good resolution. It's not the final, I assume. Our letter may not be the final. We could still be working on it. But as we voted last night to deny, unless we actually have written language, I need to abstain.
Thank you.
Now, Bert, do you have, because this will be the final resolution once it's voted on here. So do you have specific language you would like us to add in terms of that second?
On the be resolved further? Yeah. I can give you what we passed last night, and I can give you some language from there.
Time-wise, that's hard. Let's see.
Okay.
I mean, I think there are a couple of things. You can answer the hotel. Does EDC want to, your signage you're taking care of?
Signage is taken care of.
Yeah, I mean, you're working on the signage issues in terms of the extra marketing, et cetera. So does EDC want to answer?
DCP can speak to that.
Oh, CPC, okay.
Yeah,
I mean, so the...
Stand up, what's the people can say?
Hi, I'm Dylan Sandler. I work at Department of City Planning. So part of the text amendment is to have a special permit for hotels in the district. So this would create some, a new level of oversight that would give community boards, the City Planning Commission, an ability to evaluate the hotel in the context of the district, to understand if it's contributing to the area or if there's sort of an oversaturation of hotels. So we think that this is sufficient in terms of providing protections for the neighborhood.
And that idea came from Board 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One piece of language here, allowing buildings in the proposed, the P2 area, which is that 8th to 9th, the sub-districts to convert manufacturing space to residential use. That would be good to be further resolved, the discussion, but we want it. A suggestion.
Okay, I'm worried about the
Okay.
City planning, where are you guys on that? I'm worried about the implications of just putting a not specific, I know there was discussion about a couple buildings, but to put something not specific like that, I don't know that we want to open the door to wholesale residential convert. I mean, that's my concern.
It could be a process attached to it.
Did your resolution get specific with regard to the buildings?
Any particular buildings, no.
Okay, that's
just the district, which is at P2, 8th to 9th area.
That's
not Vicky's area.
Do you have any comment on it?
Yeah, I mean the intention. So under the proposed text amendment, you'd be able to convert larger existing manufacturing buildings to commercial, but you would not be able to convert them to residential. That would remain as it is today.
That's the underlying is stating.
Yeah, and the intention is to avoid displacing current businesses, and so that's the reasoning behind.
Why don't you explain the underline is staying the same, because not everybody understands that.
Right. So the in this area in the mid block west of 8th Avenue, today smaller buildings can follow the underlying zoning, and so they can be commercial, they could be residential, they could be industrial. Larger buildings larger than 70,000 feet that are existing, today can only cannot convert to residential or commercial. Under the proposed text, they would be able to convert from industrial to commercial, but still could not be able to convert to residential.
Yeah, no residential. That's what I'm talking about. People understand that.
And again, we will be discussing the buildings at issue, but I'm a little hesitant to put.
Understood.
You get fit into the but not limited to.
Oh, not limited to, okay.
Okay, let me read through the changes. So 1, 2, 3 whereas clauses down, it will say together with local council member and now council speaker, convene a Garment Center Steering Committee comprised of the city's Economic Development Corporation, representatives of garment manufacturers, the Council for Fashion Design Association, fashion designers, the Garment Center Alliance, the Business Improvement District of the Garment Center, the Real Estate Board of New York, Community Boards 4 and 5, we'll be adding, and representatives of unions, etc. Then on page 2, the third whereas clause on page 2 will read, whereas EDC subsequently agreed with Manhattan Borough President and Council Speaker, brought a proposal to the Government Center Steering Committee, parentheses, referred out by the City Planning Commission on June 11th, 2018. Then in that subparagraph 1, the creation of the custom IDA tax abatement program to preserve garment manufacturing space for 15 years with a maximum rent of $35 per square foot, while exploring the possibility of further extending the program at the request of property owners. Now, one question, do we, and I open this to EDC as well, in number 2, do we want to say the commitment by the city of up to $20 million to purchase a building in partnership with a not-for-profit to be used for garment manufacturing, which will also contain a similar affordability requirement?
With a 30, you could do with a affordability requirement akin to the IDA program,
okay,
which is $35 per square foot with escalations.
Okay.
I just don't want to. Yeah.
Oh, so let's add with escalations to the first change in subparagraph 1, and then which will also contain an affordability requirement akin to that in the IDA program.
Could I say something for clarity? Do you want to say for the $35 that it includes all expenses, so that that's clear? What you had said that the $35 included
It was a gross amount.
was a gross amount.
Sure. So it'll say $35 per square foot.
Gross.
Okay, gross. With escalations. The next whereas clause, whereas on July 12th, 2018, Manhattan Community Board 5 adopted a resolution. The following, whereas on July 25th, 2018, Community Board 4 adopted a resolution. And that is it. Those are the changes. Everyone?
Just one more thing for clarity. In number 2 on the last page, you have 2 if necessaries about the city adding additional resources.
Where are you?
It
I'm
says,
sorry.
just in the middle, it says on the second line, amendment including, if necessary, a commitment on the part of the city to add a reasonable amount of additional resources if that is necessary. So maybe you don't need both if necessaries. It's not a substantive point, it's really just redundancy.
Take out the first if necessary. So
Yeah.
the rest is
Okay, so that if the first if necessary on number 2 of the therefore be it resolved clause is stricken.
makes it more better.
Is that it? Okay, so for purposes of Borough Board on a Euler, Borough Board consists of the council members and the directly affected community board chairs. So that is a total of 13, 7 is a quorum, and the borough president. 7 is a quorum, so we have a quorum, right?
So now we'll call the roll of eligible voters. Manhattan Borough President,
Yes, with much thanks to everyone.
Councilmember Chin,
Yes, and thank you to our borough president.
Councilmember Rivera,
Thanks, everyone. Yes.
Speaker Corey Johnson, Councilmember Powers,
Yes, congratulations and thank you to everybody who worked very hard on this.
Councilmember Kalos, Councilmember Rosenthal, Councilmember Levine,
Yes, and congrats and thanks to all.
Councilmember Ayala,
Yes.
Councilmember Perkins, Councilmember Rodriguez, Community Board Chair 4, Chair Lazarin,
Abstain.
Community Board 5, Chair Barbero.
Abstain and thank you to all.
Vote passes 6 yes, 0 no, 2 abstentions.
Much more work to be done, but much thanks to everyone. Thank you, EDC.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we have a report by the Borough President's report. be seated. Excuse me, everyone. If you can exit quietly, we're going to start with council members. If council members could do their council member report outs, we'll start with council member Chin. Everyone, please. We're still conducting a meeting. Councilmember Chin, would you like to do a report out?
Good morning. I'm excited about this Garmin District text amendment. And the Borough President and I, we also submitted a text amendment in the Lower East Side, the Two Bridges area. And hopefully we will get a hearing from DCP.
Still here?
They're still here.
Still here. What's the hearing about?
Two bridges.
Two bridges.
We gotta beat back those monstrosities, those big towers. The community board 3 had a public hearing about it because the developer went to make a presentation, and the community is really, really up and on against it because they really did not talk about any mitigation. I mean, one of the things that came out in the hearing that was so ridiculous is that you're going to have 4 towers, you're going to have a few more thousand people moving in, and the impact on school is only 16 seats. It was so ridiculous. And they didn't do anything with transportation, about bus service. So I think we have a lot of work to do. On the legislation fund, we just, I'm very proud that we passed legislation last week on regulating social adult daycare with the Department of Health, because what's been going on in the city is that we have a huge increase of social adult daycare in many of the neighborhood, especially immigrant neighborhood. Right now, there are more social adult daycare than senior centers. We only have 249 senior centers, and we have more than 350 social adult daycare. And social adult daycare is supposed to take care of the more vulnerable seniors, but they're not. So the legislation, yep, that's Gail, because they take Medicaid dollar and they make a lot of money, but we were able to pass a legislation to get the Department of Health to go in there and do inspection because they serve food. Right now, the senior center that serve food, that have a kitchen, they get regular inspection by the Department of Health. But these social adult daycare, they don't. So we passed a law, now they also have to be regulated, and Department of Health now can go in there and check on them. So hopefully this will add another protection for our senior, but we still got a long way to go because a lot of tax dollars are being wasted and our seniors are not being taken care of. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Chen. Councilmember Powers?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again for everybody's work on the Garment Center District. I know it's been a lot of work in progress.
Thank you.
Just a few updates since I was last here. So on the legislative front, actually, that was your speakers. They were still here, and we passed a couple of criminal justice related bills in the chair of the Criminal Justice Committee related to one was actually to no longer charge people who are held in Rikers Island or near jails for phone calls. The city's actually raised millions of dollars every year, charging people to make phone calls to loved ones, and so we felt that was something. It was not a lot of money for the city in the overall big picture, but it was certainly meaningful to people who have to choose between a phone call or a commissary. So we passed a bill to remove that expense, and we're going to continue to look at other things that might contribute to somebody who is being held in any one of our city jails, and ensuring that we're not making sometimes our crimes of poverty even worse for people that are being held. We also, I know Councilman Rivera just left. We passed legislation to regulate programs like Airbnb, not just Airbnb, and others. that, you know, both threaten to take off affordable housing off the market, but also, I think most importantly from people where I live, are just disruptive to the neighbors and the people who live nearby. So we passed Intro 899 and Councilor Rivera's sponsored. And then I have another bill that we're working on, which is about campaign finance. I have a number of campaign finance bills. One is about, there was a federal decision earlier this year that if you're running for office and you have child care expenses, you can actually use some of your campaign expenses to campaign funding to pay for that, believing that, you know, that is an important cost and make the decision about whether somebody wants to run for office or not. I have a bill to bring that decision and apply it to New York City elections as well. So we're hoping to get that passed sometime in the near future. A few others, just I know that with the borough president and others in this office, we've been looking at a number of things in this, in the borough particularly, that we believe are used to create out-of-scale development loopholes. We would all, I think, all refer them to, whether it's mechanical voids, gerrymandered lots, many other. I don't have to tell some of those who are here about what that means. Basically, when we create, I say this all the time, when we create rules, and we create zoning, and we create expectations and about what can be built in any single neighborhood, I find it completely unfair to those who live in the neighborhood that you can then compile lots that are blocks away from each other and call those one lot. You can create huge mechanical voids in a building, and you can boost the height of your building far beyond what would be expected within the zoning text. So with zoning resolution. So many of us were out there, I think it was last week on a very, very hot day, talking about some of the gerrymandered lots, some people using very creative building shapes to get out of regulations. We are going to continue that. I know the borough president cares about that as well, and make sure that all the community boards here can actually look at the lots in their district and not have to have create an expectation of what, like the most unrealistic expectation would be built, because that's what's happening right now. And I'm glad that we have a lot of the folks in this borough who are, I think, on the case to try to prevent some of that. And lastly, just on the community side of things, we have a couple of events coming up. But one thing I wanted to mention was we've been with Councilmember Levine, as the office has been doing as well, collecting hundreds of items by constituents for children that have been separated from their families. We read about it every single day. It's a disheartening situation. I will say, you realize the best of many people who reached out to my office to say, how can I help? I speak a second language, I can be helpful, I have materials I want to donate. One person reached out and said, I will be a foster parent. It's a disheartening moment, but inspiring to see people who want to respond to it. So we have my district office is filled with items that we're getting to the centers to ensure that those kids have a program. I mean, even at the worst moment where they don't have their parents, at least can maybe have some comfort and support. So if you have any constituents or any members who want to donate, you can certainly use our office as a place to do that. And thank you to anybody who's done that already. So thank you. Thanks.
I just want to add that as the charter revision goes along, all these issues are going to be part of the discussion.
Can you send around a flyer about the donation?
Yeah, we will. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll send it out.
Chair Notaro, Community Board 1.
Things have been a little slow in July, but two major things have happened. I did report last month that Howard Hughes Corporation, who has been developing the Seaport area, purchased a full block site on Water Street. We invited them into our executive committee in July to start the process of working through the impact of that. The second major thing, all of us suffer with some of these issues. Major issues with traffic parking in residential neighborhoods in Battery Park City. And it's getting to be a little tense between local residents and NYPD. We tried to work it out with them and DOT, but we'll need further work with a council member and other elected. So that's my report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Community Board 2, very cool.
Hey, so I'm very excited. We have a new committee meeting tonight. We took the opportunity to sort of move things around a bit, move some information areas. Our new committee is Economic Development and Small Business. Not that I borrowed it from CB3 or anything. But the benefit will be that we can free up the Land Use Committee, which is deluged with applications, by moving economic development to a separate committee. We're hoping to free up the Land Use Committee for more housing issues. You know, we can't always be responding to applications, but we're forced to by the sheer onslaught. We do not have a quiet July, and we do have multiple committees needing to meet in August because the liquor license applications don't stop, the sidewalk cafes, even some park issues. Something interesting about liquor licenses, I always tell you what's coming because what starts in our area often ripples out, and that is the new trend seems to be for upper floor licensing for liquor, including rooftops, including outdoor terraces, which of course in a mixed-use neighborhood with a lot of residential is always a problem. And they're getting a little bit smarter. The new tactic seems to be apply for a beer and wine license. That way you get the premises licensed, and we can't start with the public interest. So, you know, wherever we throw up a roadblock, the attorneys are very clever, and you know, some of them might be fine. Some of them really aren't, especially, you know, a terrace right across from a residential window. So keeping an eye on that. To Borough President Brewer's point, the Mayor's Charter Commission, there was virtually no notice, and a lot of it affects community boards, and we did not have a chance to have a position. So Alita and I were at the Manhattan. I know you went to the Bronx to testify.
Was it well attended? No.
It was, there's a lot of anger. But we did not have a chance to take a position on so many of the issues that directly affect the community board in the areas we live. So most of us started our testimony with, you know, that we can only speak for ourselves, which of course dilutes, but we had no choice. And then lastly, it is wonderful that Councilmember Cabrera found us $42,000 per board, and we will use it, but what we don't know yet is how we're allowed to use it. I want to get data-driven and live streaming and consultants to archive all of our old stuff and make it findable. And the shopping list is long.
We're working on that to get that
that's
clarified.
wonderful news. Then I'll conclude my report with that, because that's a good
We're
positive.
working on that to get that clarified. Because it can't be for personnel.
No.
Community Board 3?
Hi, good morning. I'm David Ford here for Alicia Lewis Coleman. She sends her regards, especially to Vicky and the people affected by the steam explosion. I believe that's your area. Yes, you know, it affects me personally. I live on 14th Street and 3rd on the border of District 3. But I shop and I dine in Flatiron, so it's impacted me as well. So our thoughts are with you in the community.
The trucks are right outside our building today.
Yes.
Whitewashing everything, you know, or whatever they do. Yeah.
One of our key issues is the two bridges issue, which the council member referred to. We're having a public hearing on the 14th. We're following the Census 2020 issue and the charter revision. I'm going to be leading those projects. We're also starting some community engagement to make sure that there's support for the tech hub. We've gotten a message from sources out of the mayor's office that the opposition is all that they're hearing from. So we want to make sure that people that are in favor of the project are speaking up and their voices are continually heard. And then the Transportation Committee had a meeting with the Department of Transportation and the MTA regarding the transportation issues with all the construction and the L train shutdown. There's a lot more discussion to go on with that. And you know, that's really the long and short of what we're working on. Of course, our land use issue, again, all the applications that we're dealing with. One of the things we did is we had to temporarily, because of some issues, suspend our public housing committee, and we're going to revamp it. We just put it on hold for a while. We had a problem with participation in the leadership on that committee. And we also moved our Arts and Cultural Committee out of land use to give them more time, and we put it in the Economic Development Committee. So we had to do some of that movement. And there's no summer off for the community board. I conclude my report. The city doesn't sleep.
Thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Before, Chair Lazarus?
Well, our business license permits is months every month. Those are liquor license every month. The other committees have off August, but liquor license, July, August, they meet continually, applications one after another after another. I'm surprised to hear that the 42,000 is undefined, because we were already making plans to hire a part-time consultant.
Well, we'll check with it. I was under the impression that it's not for employees.
personnel.
Well, this is not, would not be a permanent.
Right, let us find
Maybe.
out.
I'd
No, I
like-
understand.
yes,
Let's find out.
because I'll put everything, the discussion we're having on hold.
We'll get back to you immediately.
That's important. Our issues currently, we have some new issues on bike lanes, but everybody has issues on bike lanes. We've actually, one of the issues on bike lanes, besides extending on 10th Avenue, on 8th Avenue, is the narrowness of the sidewalks on 8th Avenue.
Right.
And particularly during rush hours, which is almost all the time, pedestrians are pedestrianizing the bike lanes. So you have conflict of use. Because they're not, sidewalks are narrow. The sidewalks around on 8th Avenue are just a little bit wider than the bike lane. And when you have people headed to the Port Authority or coming from the Port Authority, you know, they're 10 abreast. And we actually ended up with a collision, crash, pedestrian and bicyclist with injuries. Nothing permanent, nothing, you know, long term, but still an actual conflict there. Working up, continuing, it's an ongoing process, Port Authority Bus Terminal. One of the issues emerging in that, right now we're only going towards the scope, and then we haven't even got to an EIS yet, but one of the issues where everybody just listens to the other side and smiles is we are pushing in terms of pollution abatement, sidewalk, street control, is having every bus in the area in the new bus terminal. Port Authority, well, we'll try. But you know, they're...
Checks in the mail.
You know, and of course, because a lot of the buses that come through the tunnel, intercity buses, not the commuter buses, do not park, do not use the Port Authority bus terminal. They use streets scattered throughout our area. One more thing that just really weird that we just discovered. The Intrepid is having a private party. You know, they do that. That's their right to do that. The fireworks. No one knew that. It just accidentally we found out they're going to be using fireworks. You talk to the Hudson River Park. You know, there's nothing in the lease that says notify us if you're having fireworks.
Okay.
How do private events get permission to use fireworks? And if they do, if there is a process which we're not aware of, we should be notified.
Okay, we
Yeah.
can handle it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Community Board 5?
Sure. Well, we did pass the Garment Center. That took a long time, and I won't go into all of that. I'll mention a couple of the reasons why we denied it that I didn't go into earlier. They weren't in the Borough Board, but in the Borough Board resolution, but it was in addition to what coincided with what we were asking for. We wanted to see any increase in the permitted height of the street wall be implemented in concert with a cap on the maximum height of buildings in the area.
Okay.
We're all concerned about that. We put in about public plazas to not, the proposed language allows buildings with a public plaza to not have to abide by the street wall requirements, and we are concerned about that.
Okay.
The flashing lights, which Board 4 also had in, and We wanted more clear and detailed parameters to determine whether hotel development seeking a special permit, that was the whole thing that went on last month. In the special district, enhances diversity of businesses in the area, and the last thing was that the application process before the IDA proceed in a timely manner, and that we had an actual date that the application appeared before the Board of IDA at the September meeting. Is that, what did we come up with, Gail, for IDA? Whether or not there's a actual time closure on that?
For IDA?
Yes, go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Go ahead about the idea.
That the timeline for the applications to appear before the Board of IDA, did we have an actual date?
My understanding, yes. I want to say September 9th.
Okay.
I will get back to
Good.
you.
No, that's okay.
I think there was a 9th and an 11th, and so the applications that are in now will be heard, those dates. But in order to, like I said, why can't we have more signed up? Apparently you have all the paperwork. So after that, we could start with the others, because they meet November next.
Okay, great. Okay, and then the last thing was we finally had a design on One Vanderbilt. I don't know if anybody's seen this, but have you? Has anyone seen it? We're very excited about it because, as you all know, we worked for so long with EDC on East Midtown rezoning, and the building going up on One Vanderbilt, SL Green. They hired a phenomenal architect. Did you see the plans?
I just love it. I'm with
It's
you.
beautiful. It really is beautiful. So, just to give you all an idea, this plaza is expected to accommodate an estimated 5,500 pedestrians per hour at peak time. So the idea was, what can they do to make sure that they weren't impeding the flow of traffic? So they had this incredible architect went to some of the designs that were done by Michelangelo in Italy in the plazas, and he used that as kind of his guide to do it. He has 5 circular planting discs with trees in them down the midpoint of the plaza. Cornell University is going to work on overseeing all the horticultural needs. The edge of each of the discs, they're very beautifully done. You can rest there, but you can't sit there for a long period of time. I think your butt's going to get a little, go to sleep or something if you're sitting on it. It's wide enough to just sit and, read something for a second or have a quick cup of coffee or something. There's no vehicular traffic going through. That includes emergency vehicles, and the reason is that they found that emergency vehicles can get to it from all the other points. The permanent bollards that are now there, I don't know if you're familiar, there's a ginormous number of bollards going up the avenue, on Vanderbilt Avenue. We're recommending that they be taken out, and so is SL Green. The city hasn't said so yet, but then they are putting in ones at the 2 entrances, because that's where the problem would be. You don't need them on the side streets. And then let's see. No vending, this is important. There will be no vending or concessions in the plaza at any time, and the planter disc effectively act as a deterrent to any event producers who would like to use the plaza for a commercial event. And this one, I think, is important for every other community board and district. Due to the implementation of site-specific plaza rules employed in Times Square regarding costume characters and other commercial activity, there is now a framework for establishing a similar system in any other plaza in the city. And Grand Central Partnership maintains a keen interest in quickly proposing similar rules for this plaza should the need become apparent. So we're hoping that, I think that's a big concern for everybody. It'll have one area in the north that will be available for public art installation, which should be really nice. The construction is supposed to to commence in November of 2019 with completion in 2020 to coincide with the opening of One Vanderbilt in September. And we think this is going to provide significantly increased space for pedestrian flow and really be a welcoming for people coming to one of our grandest landmarks
Yeah, no.
in the world, not just the city. Grand Central Station Grand Central Terminal is just phenomenal. So, I won't bore you with all the other little
Thank you.
things.
Thank you very much.
CB6? CB7?
Okay, CB7 and CB9 had our fifth Nycha Forum on June 30th. We got Brian Honing was, Victor Botch was there, and somebody from Scott Stringer's office talking about the finances of, as we know it. Nycha did not come. They promised me, however, that they would meet with us, with CB7 and CB9, in August to plan a bigger event. And what we're thinking is be something that all the CBs, be an event that all the Manhattan CBs can participate in. So we'll let you know once that meeting takes place. The Broadway Task Force met. We met with DOT. We did a walkthrough. We did a separate walkthrough this past Monday. And one of the things we're going to do is on September 21, which is a Friday, it's International Park-In Day. So what you do is you take 2 or 3 parking spaces, you turn them into a pop-up park. I know there's going to be one in your district. And so we're going to get 3 or 4 parking spaces starting at 10 in the morning until 10 at night, and have all kinds of events going on, some music, some exercise programs, some art programs for children. So we're very excited about that. This year we're going to be really concentrating on affordable housing, really looking at what exists in the community, what is new, what, especially with the 421A, what is age, I guess it ages out. And then we have 2 committee meetings in August. Land use is meeting on August 1st. And we're going to be discussing all the different locations, and unfortunately in CB7, that are ripe for super talls. And so we've invited people from your office, and we've invited people from some other experts to come and help talk about this.
Thank you. CB8?
Just briefly in terms of topics from the community board, and then I wanted to talk about the Charter Commission, if I may. So affordable housing is an issue. There's a building going up on Roosevelt Island with inclusionary housing. We're not sure that they're really complying with the original plan for Roosevelt Island, which is vastly different than the as-built Roosevelt Island, but in any event, they're able to transfer 88,000 square feet of air rights, and we would rather have them stay on Roosevelt Island than come to the already overdeveloped Upper East Side. Bike lanes, parks, we have a lot of conflict with the Parks Department on the Queensboro Oval, where they have a 10-year RFP for tennis bubble. The word tennis was used 12 times in their RFP, someone counted. And other parks, community, and Parks Department issues. So we're working very much on that. With respect to the Charter Commission, we started a committee, which I'm co-chairing, and we prepared, based on prior community board resolutions, a lot of comments on the land use aspects of it, including the desire, which crosses over to the community board. There's been a lot of testimony about providing a land use planner to community boards, which we are all dramatically in favor of and support. And then I understand that the Mayor's Commission is not taking up other land use issues, and that will be up to the City Council, because we're concerned REBNY is pushing for more as-of-right development, which we, of course, are opposed to, but we're also interested in more input, community input into ULURP. We want more transparency. I mean, there already is community input into ULURP. We want to know when applications start. We want more community input into all kinds of development and notification of as-of-right, but I don't think they're taking that up. What I really wanted to talk about with that preamble is community boards, because I was really surprised to find that some people seem to be blaming community boards for all of the issues in the community and are really opposed to community boards. There is actually testimony to get rid of community boards, period. that there is some sense that all of the overdevelopment is that we're responsible for, so they really don't understand that we're only advisory and not so much at that. So there's that issue. And then also in terms, there's a lot of testimony in favor of term limits. There was testimony calling for elections of community board members. Gail, you do such a terrific job with an outside agency looking at things, and people commented on that. And on the application process, on the interviews, on the diversity, on the experience that's required. The council members also do an outstanding job, but apparently in other boroughs there are more problems. And so there's also calls for uniformity of the application process and the selection process. So we have a lot to comment on, but the problem really is, as Terry pointed out, time, because they're coming out with their ballot proposals right after Labor Day. Right. So for all of the boards that don't meet in August, and for many, and I think there were 5 in Manhattan that don't meet in July, there's absolutely no opportunity. So we're meeting every 2 weeks for a while until we could respond and get things out there. And I want to make sure that whatever we prepare about community boards, even if we don't have, I think we can extrapolate some information based on prior resolutions and or based on my experiences. I did testify about lack of need for term limits based on, and I hadn't seen this, I guess because it was afterwards, your testimony about the turnover. We had 25% of board turnover in the last 2 years alone, without, just from attrition and from non-reappointments. So term limits really don't seem to be necessary. But we want to be able to respond on the community board issues that were raised. I brought a copy of the report, which is, we got online. This was released last week. So there really was no time on the 18th. Yeah, the 17th or 18th. There's just no time, and we just hope that our comments will be heard and digested and will influence what the Mayor's Commission is doing. Thank you for listening for so long on that, but I would urge all community boards to take part in this and let your thoughts be known, because they seem to be listening, and I hope that they are taking this into account.
Can I just ask a question? The people that testified against community boards, they were not people that were developers. These were people, no,
residents.
Residents.
Yeah, there were a couple of people that suggested that community boards are responsible for overdevelopment, and then there was someone on Community Board 4, I believe in the Bronx, who said that the chair of the community board gave the meeting over to the city council person, who was screaming not screaming, but arguing for support of a proposed development project in lieu of an animal shelter, that they had wanted to develop a parcel of land. And so she called it a hijacked meeting, and there was no opportunity for any other commentary that the city council person had really
what we're up against, because I testified in the Bronx, my testimony I think is out there, we're going to send it to everybody. I am strongly in support of not getting rid of term limits because of all your expertise in land use. And I made that over and over again. It seemed like in the Bronx there were like 10 of us. I don't know how many in Manhattan. There were not.
There were more.
Okay. A little more. But there were very few in the Bronx. And I couldn't say the whole time, but I don't think anybody from the community boards even attended. But Board 9, a wonderful gentleman, Ken Miles came from Board 9, and he was wonderful. So he testified similarly. But I think I love my colleagues in the other boroughs, borough presidents, but they don't put the effort in. And that's where we're dealing with, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we're also dealing with a challenging situation because, for the obvious reason. So, I think, we need to make your voices very loud. I was real loud. I think they listened to us, and they did say that in other hearings, because they've had other hearings besides this one, and still didn't tell anybody about them. Sometimes at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't know who comes over there.
Quick question, because we got the report like 3 days before, and I read it over the weekend, and I couldn't be at the meeting on Monday, and I asked a couple of other people to go. But we couldn't really testify on behalf of CB7. We could only testify on behalf of
ourselves,
us as individuals. And our board won't have a full board meeting until early in September, at which point we could vote on something. And unfortunately, one of our board members was asked by TA to testify for term limits. And so I instructed him that if he said that he was a board member, he had to say that he was not speaking on behalf of the board.
Yeah.
Gail, should we do that through Borough Board, or is there not enough time?
I think it would be great to do both. I mean, the time frame, I don't know, it's a November ballot, as we
Right.
all know, and they have to have it in by a certain period. Let us find out.
They are having, the ballot proposals will be ready right after Labor Day.
Yeah,
And in early August, this is just really repeats of prior testimony without any kind of recommendations. So I think the recommendations come out in early August, and then the actual proposals in very early
But
September.
the answer to your question is this: yes, it would be helpful to have a vote in September on whatever you think is appropriate, because November is not September. So say, for instance, they have to have the information in, but it doesn't mean we can't have a press conference to tell people. I don't even know what's going to be on the ballot, so I don't know what to say. But the issue is we can have something to say to tell the voters how to vote.
Good.
So,
Could
yes,
we,
your
since-
input is helpful.
Since we don't meet, our liquor license is the only one that meets in August, can we join you if we can get
We
people?
don't have a meeting either in August,
Oh.
so the land use, we were
But you have your
able-
little committee.
That's what I'm
We
talking
have a
about.
committee,
Yeah.
sure.
Could
We're
we-
meeting on Monday again at the district office. We invited Ben Kalos to come
Can you
for the
send me
first
that
half hour.
information?
Sure, but for the actual appointments versus elections, I don't know how many
Oh, I'm
there.
for appointments and not elections.
I agree with
Not
you, and
even-
someone,
Yeah, I don't like that.
and so you might want to have something in support of that. The fear with elections is the influence of money and the lack of qualifications, and that it will, but what's
be
motivating, at least for some people, the idea of term limits seems to be diversity in the board and matching the components of the community.
We
So
do
if
it.
you're going
We
to
have all-
prepare
we're the only
something,
borough to have it.
respond.
That's the problem.
What is it?
We're the only borough to have, we know the diversity of the board, and we know the diversity of the communities, thanks
exactly.
to Alvin Bonilla. However, nobody else does. So
Yeah.
one of the things, that, I actually said, if you want to do what we're doing, which is what everybody seems to want, then you have to tell the other boroughs to do it.
Right.
But don't throw us out because of what we've been
Exactly.
doing. Elections of any, I don't know, I've been around so long, the school boards used to be elected. If you had 1% voting, there wasn't even 1%, it was like 0.0001%. And then it was buddies and friends.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's what.
Promise you
We're worried
buddies
about.
and friends.
I think the point is that they're codifying a requirement to remove people we might want, because in other places, they're not putting on people that we should want.
Right. I think we might
Yeah.
win this issue, but we have to keep pushing.
We have to
Yep.
fight it.
Hopefully, quality supersedes
Exactly.
other things.
Now's when we're going to go fast, because we go CB9, CB10, and now CB11.
Okay, so quick stuff. We actually, because of the rezoning last year, we were fatigued. And so this year, our board is not meeting in July and August, but what we have done, I've tasked the executive committee that if anything comes up, like some kind of permit that needs to be done, the executive committee will vote on it, take a position, and then in September, the entire board will ratify it.
Right.
This way, the work of the board will continue. We have renamed some of our committees to shorten the committees to more reflect what their missions are. All of our committees are reviewing their missions and to ensure that we are still on the right track with the changes within our community. With that said, we've also changed our meeting schedule on a monthly schedule. The second week of the month, those committees are now moving into, two of those committees are moving into the first week. So we will have 2 committee meetings on 3 separate days at 2 different locations. The reason that we're doing that is because a lot of times our committees don't get their minutes in on time. And so when we need to review and read, there's not enough time within the second week, and then the third week on that Tuesday we meet. So we've done that as well. We're still planning for the replacement of the J. Marion Sims statue. The group that was for the removal of the J. Marion Sims statue has been having meetings at the 115th Street Family Health Center, which is under Pat Moore John. So they've been meeting regularly. We continue to have many, because it's the summer, many family days and many events in the East Harlem area and Community Board 11. And I've been fortunate to bump into Gail almost at every single one. Panorama is starting up in East Harlem. The East Harlem Resiliency Plan continues to meet. That is a group that is working with Dream Charter School to try to get together a plan and a focus for East Harlem. We continue to have conversations between the lack of resources for LGBTQ residents and students in East Harlem to see if we can bring more resources to the community, and that we're doing with the 115th Street Health Center. The Second Avenue forums are going forward. They've already sent out letters to the impacted buildings that they are going to be once it starts up. We continue. We had a Nycha forum with an international flair this past about 2 weeks ago, where Gail was a speaker at. Harlem Hospital has some changes that may be coming down the pike, and so they briefed us on some of the things that they may be doing, where they may be eliminating certain services but expanding others, and that's to be determined. I wanted to say that I had mentioned something to Audrey. We were fortunate enough to walk in the disability parade, and Gail and that. And so we had some, but I think that it's important that all community boards start having a presence at the parades, whether you have a banner or not. It would be nice if each chair or can appoint 1 or 2 people to go, then that would be roughly 24 people that could walk behind the banner of the Manhattan Borough President or your own banners themselves. That will give visibility to the community boards and help dispel some of the myths. I'm not going to continue.
He also has great different colored CB11 shirts.
Yes,
Phenomenal.
depending. Yes, I only have blue and orange, and so every weekend I wear like the blue on a Saturday and an orange on a Sunday, just to give us
So we can spend the $42,000.
Actually, we have some comment on that from our chief of staff. But first, you finish with your.
Right, and then one of the things that I wanted to mention quickly on the 42,000 was based on whatever is decided that could be spent on. I think that some of the community boards have a lot of the same needs in terms of live streaming and things like that, that we might want to decide to put a group together to figure out if we pooled our resources, what would the benefit be across all community boards as opposed to doing something individually. And then of course if the individual is more important to the board, then that's fine, but we may be able to pool those 42,000 and do something really great.
Web design and some of
Yes,
that.
That's it.
Thank you. CB12?
I'll be as quick as possible and brief as possible.
We would appreciate that.
But we'll always last still.
No. Sometimes we start from 12 and work our way down.
So I'm Richard Lewis. Charlie could not be here because of legal issues he has to take care of as an attorney. Committee Board 12 is on summer recess for July, August. That doesn't mean we are AWL. In fact, we had our committee of the whole meeting on Tuesday to take care of a few emergencies. And this has been a long season for us for 10 months, including the inward rezoning, which is now in the City Council, that the leadership testify and Gail Discretion testify. And I think there's 2 more sessions of that at the City Council in August 2nd, and the 8th, where the stated meeting, they will decide what we're going to do about that issue. Also, we've been busy resolving the Dyckman bike lane situation, the Haven Avenue Plaza, and approving or disapproving some 250 liquor licenses. We get a lot of liquor licenses to go over, and even during the summer they come in as well. So we've been very active, and we still will be active. So that sort of sums up where we are at. This summer we have 2 projects ongoing. One is to install the live streaming in our conference room. We're more than happy to share both the rollout and the procurement of that process with anyone who's interested, as well as the success and the cost involved, and as well as all the equipment. I personally will be doing it, so if you want any other information, you can see me. We also are going to further upgrade our webpage so that it's more user-friendly, more graphical, and a few other little things that will cut down.
Jessica, the OTPS?
Oh, just so, I mean.
Can you stand up, because Jessica, people don't know what this is.
Basically, there aren't a lot of specifications for this money. It's OTPS, which can include a consultant, of course, and it's open. I mean, OMB doesn't have any specifications around it. So if you have a proposal, you know, you should talk to someone at OMB, but, you know, they're very clear that this money came from the council just allocated to the community boards. You know, the thing to keep in mind is that it's OTPS, and that is, for now, it's one shot, it's not baseline.
Right.
So, you know, if it's a recurring contract or something, you wouldn't want to do that. We're gonna fight very hard to make it baseline, but it's not right now, so you need a one-shot thing. The other thing is, and Noel had to leave, but he is actually working to try to figure out if exactly what Nielsa said, if there are some joint things that the boards can
Right.
do that would save some money,
Yeah.
whether it's web design or database or anything like that. So we need to, you know, and Noel will circulate some of that information.
Why don't we send out
after
this
report.
information so everybody knows?
The other thing I just want to mention about budget though, which just reminded me, there have been some issues in the past around boards spending down and ending up with a surplus at the end, and we'd really like to work with you starting now so that there are no surpluses. Because we want to spend it all. We're going to spend every penny in the budget, and it's hard. Sometimes it gets hard at the end of the year, but you really can do it. You can plan for it. So we're going to be again convening and sending out information about that because we really want everyone to spend everything that you do have.
We try to do that.
No, at some point too. I mean, everyone tries, but you know.
We just bought Community Board 4 hats for everyone. With some of the money that was left at the end.
CB3 Susan Stelzer is probably.
Now we're almost concluding at the borough
I
president
mean, very,
report.
very quick, I want to indicate, as you have, that we did testify in the Bronx about no term limits for members, and I won't get into it because it's all on the table out there, and we'll send it to everybody. I want to thank the Inwood Rezoning Community Board 12. You heard a little bit about that. Also, the La Marina is in the press every day, which is also in your district.
You should know that we voted against renewing their licenses before even said this.
A lot of challenges,
Yes.
although I want them to exist, so it's always challenging.
Yes.
In Board 9, Argus is a nonprofit that has been, have bought a brownstone for $4.3 million and is trying to put in a residential program for methadone, which I think is not in the right location. So we've been fighting that. I'm very supportive of mental health programs and drug treatment programs, but not this in this location. We have been at a lot of press conferences, as many of you have, from the children and the separation issues. I have to say that it's an amazing community in terms of the lawyers and the folks from different communities coming together, and we are 416 young people in the 5 boroughs, is my understanding. All the children have lawyers, but that doesn't necessarily help reunification. It's helping. So just so you know, if you want more information, we know about that. I want to thank Aldrin again, because we're working on census. That is incredibly important. It's not just the issue of God help us if the citizenship question is in there. Lawyers are trying to get rid of it, but we want Manhattan to be #1 in terms of counting. I don't know how else to say it. Bill Thompson is the deputy mayor who's working on this, for those of you who don't know, but if you want to have discussions, you want Aldrin or Bani or others to come, because we have to count people, and it's going to be harder than ever.
Mm-hmm.
So you really do, I think, would be a great topic for the community boards to take up. 2 years goes real fast, as we know, and Aldrin could be more specific. Maybe we'll have more discussions on it. That's something that's really, really important. I also want to thank everybody who, as Community Board 11 stated chair, we want to thank everybody who came to the disability parade. We have 100 interns this summer, which of course makes me very happy. I had them all over to my house for dinner, and we are. I'm so tired. No, you have no idea what. We had the corners and chairs. It was really challenging, but we did it. And the question now, we're working on lots of different projects. So I hope that as a result of the summer, we'll have looking at school playgrounds. We're trying to look at things that need attention, and then be able to share. A few years ago, we did the topic of the curb cuts, and I think they're being fixed. Is my impression. Some of them, not all of them. In terms of the biggest event we have coming up is the August 8th at Fordham on 62nd Street. We have our annual senior program. It's usually hugely attended. This one is on seniors and the arts, and it is a big topic that is always needed to be discussed. The Dominican Day Parade launch event is August 2nd at the United Palace. Some of you probably know that at 6 o'clock. And then in September is the African American Day Parade in Harlem. And our event is September 14th at 5 o'clock at the Harlem State Office Building. This will all be material that we'll send out. And the parade is September 16th. And I have to say, in terms of parades, this is one of my favorites, because it goes right through the neighborhood and isn't the whole Fifth Avenue drama that is what we're used to. So anyway, we have lots more going on, but those are some topics that are of interest. We're also working on the L train. We're all impacted by that in terms of trying to figure out where are the buses going to turn around. That's just one of the topics. It goes on and on. So we are very aware. But thank you all very much.
We have a fast approaching deadline for our MCAP program, the grants for nonprofits. You also know about that. You get the emails. You get so I think the deadline is August 9th or 10th, I believe. So it's fast approaching. Please help share that.
Is it
wide and
August
far.
9th?
Yes, I think it's August 9th or August 10th.
No,
Please
August
share.
9th, let's be clear. August 9th.
It's August 9th, okay. Please share that information far and wide within your community boards. And without no further updates, do we have a motion to adjourn? Any council, no, the council member spoke, right. We have a motion, we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? No abstentions, noes? Okay. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you so much.